We've have a panel discussion on insights on social cohesion from diverse constituencies, which will create more of a platform for our discussion on the specific issue we're looking at today, which is teachers and social cohesion. We're very pleased to have a diverse panel from Naptosa, SADTU, and the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation. Unfortunately, the colleague from the Human Rights Commission couldn't attend today's session, but we're very pleased that we've got an alternative and the opportunity of the Commission for the Promotion and Protection of the Rights of Cultural, Religious and Linguistic Communities to present Rinesh Kuman. So without any further ado, and can I ask the panelists either at the beginning or at the end of your input, your 7-minute input, just to summarize the 2 or 3 key points you want to make up front. So that can be the take-home messages for informing our discussions. Could I then start with the representative from Naptosa, Chris Hart, please, to give us his input. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I recognize quite a few faces, so I feel I'm amongst friends. But as we look around at the people assembled here, we realize that we are not as culturally diverse as perhaps we should be. And I think that has been one of the issues that's faced us as an organization as well. I know the time's limited, so I'm going to try and skip things. I also did have a PowerPoint, and I'm not going to show it to you, but I'm going to work from it because I'm probably going to skip 2/3 of it. Our organization realized sometime about 2-3 years ago that what was happening officially wasn't actually getting to grips with issues. So we started to explore social cohesion and the in-service training of our members, and we had to also look at some theoretical underpinnings of that, which is a bit of a minefield by itself. And I think if we go back to maybe to 97 and the whole issue of the Rainbow Nation, we realized that the idea of social cohesion is one that is different in different people's minds. And I think that's a very big problem for us, and particularly in schools, as was indicated earlier in the analysis of the report. Each school is an individual organization, and it's absolutely critical that we cannot have a one-size-fits-all approach. I'd also just like to say that we are very thankful that this report has emerged, and I think it's going to be a guiding document to many, many people. The Rainbow Nation idea then, as I say, is something that has possibly fallen into disfavor. I mean, even if we look back a year or two, our president was talking about social cohesion, and then he suddenly swapped over to white monopoly capital, which to my mind doesn't exactly help with the issue of social cohesion, but we'll leave it at that at this stage. We know that South Africa belongs to all who live in it and seeks to build a society where opportunity is not defined by race, gender, class, or religion. And within a school community, social cohesion has to be a shared belief, one that enables trust. And also, where you have a cohesive school, it must work towards the well-being of all its members, fighting exclusion, marginalization, and creating a sense of belonging. And of course, this is one of the big issues facing us at the moment. I think maybe one quote I'd like to give you from Robert Schweitzer: the way children and young people are educated and trained affects not only their self-perception and their views of their nation, but also their image of others. If a negative image of others is inculcated at an early age, particularly in systems that do not encourage critical thinking, these perceptions can exacerbate hatred and be an indirect cause of violence. And I think that's quite a critical quote. And one of the problems and legacies of apartheid, of course, is that many people do not have a positive identity. And that is something that needs to be worked at. We also have to work at the counterbalancing side of social cohesion, the opposite, which of course is polarization. And polarization obviously is a potential problem. When we looked at the issue with our own members, and I can speak only for NAPTOSA members, we found very basic things are lacking amongst teachers. And now remember, we're not talking about initial teacher training, we are talking about in-service training in general and what we think we need to do. Majority of us cannot even recite the 11 official languages of our country. So that's a thing that we should think about. We also don't understand the racial breakdown of our country, which is also critical and obviously varies from place to place. We don't understand LGBTQI, all of us. How many genders are there? And if you are teaching in a single-sex school, do you need to talk about gender? And some people say no. And that, of course, is an issue all by itself. What was quite frightening is a study a while ago. It was a GCRO study, 2013. The survey said that 69% of black Africans said gay and lesbian people deserve equal rights. But 13% said it was fine to commit violence towards those people. And that was in Gauteng, and the 13% amounts to 1.2 million people. So we have issues. We have issues, of course, of lasting relationships with our past. And I think the ones that cause for us major concern in terms of the current realities are what was mentioned in the report, which is quite a critical one, is that many school learner populations have remained predominantly monoracial or monocultural in value, and this, of course, is also linked to that issue of, I'm not going to use the word class, let's use the word wealth, and the fact that middle-class learners have more mobility. And social cohesion, therefore, is more prevalent amongst those who are middle class, or at least the potential for that is. And that by itself is an issue, but it also hides something, and that is that if you have what is apparently a monoracial, mono-gender school, you think, well, what are the cohesion issues? But there are many, and one has to look at those, and I think it's one of the things that I want to unpack a little bit in a moment. We do believe that social cohesion can be taught, but the problem here is that the potential curriculum is derived from various and sometimes conflicting resources, and historically, just to mention two, the anti-racism school of thought and the multicultural school of thought. They have fundamentally different approaches, and therefore, if you're going to teach about social and cultural diversity, or you're going to teach about social cohesion, you're starting from a different standpoint, and that is something that has to be thought about. The other big problem that we've got at the moment, and it has been mentioned, of course, is that we have a curriculum problem. But more than that, our curriculum currently is overloaded. I would stand up and almost be prepared to commit violence against those who say, let's add this on. We have to take something away in order to deal with this in the curriculum. And that is very, very fundamental. We did some sensitivity exercises, and one of the things that came up is when people think of diversity and social cohesion, they forget the range. Because we've got race, gender, linguistic group, class, religion, nationality, and disability. And many people only focus on one or two, and in South Africa we tend to get over-focused on the racial side, or perhaps on the issues of inequality. We have to look at all of them because each school is a microcosm in some sense, but it is not the sort of microcosm that reflects what South Africa as a whole is. It's peculiar to its own school identity. There are exercises that we've tried to encourage teachers to become more sensitive to the issue of social cohesion. As I said, there is a background knowledge that is lacking, and that makes this very difficult. The hindrances that we really think are critical, and this is in terms of what I was asked to do in terms of summarizing, is that if we are going to look at this in the school curriculum, we have to make space for it. The curriculum is too full. The other thing is that the subject matter is very sensitive, and in certain schools it's an almost do not touch this issue. This issue is too dangerous. Teachers are scared. We've seen what happened at certain schools with regards to what we would most probably have regarded some years as being issues to gloss over, like hairstyles, etc. But these have become major issues because they're tied to culture. So I think we've got to a situation where educators become quite scared to tackle these issues. And in terms of unpacking that in a classroom where you've got the type of diversity that might exist or the lack of diversity, you don't know where that discussion's going to go. Therefore, you cannot define it to a 30-minute lesson because it has to get closure. And that's also a critical part of working on both diversity and social cohesion. There's also a sense amongst educators that this is a societal problem. We've got to sort out society before we can sort out what happens in the school. So I think that is something that needs to be addressed by perhaps skilling educators. And at the moment, we can see that the current political climate is tending a little bit more towards polarization than social cohesion, despite what all our documents say. And that is somewhat problematic. So what are we as an organization doing about it? We have adopted a policy of sensitizing our members to issues in both cultural diversity and social cohesion. We have run two-day seminars on 2 subjects. The one is social cohesion directly and dealing with social cohesion and diversity. The other one is dealing with the issue relating to and specifically stemming out of what happened at Sans Souci and at Pretoria Girls, is how do schools adapt their policies to cope with diversity in South Africa. And as I say, we've got to go back and look at all the types of diversity and not just be single or dual dimensional about those things. As we work through these training courses, I think we will adapt and improve them, as well as that we are working on some shorter courses as well. But at this stage, all we can say is we have only managed to address hundreds, not even thousands. Thank you.
Good morning, colleagues. I'm Jonathan from SATU. And where I come from, in my days, we didn't have a projector in the classroom. So I like this new technology of the slideshow. Okay. If it works. There you are. No, thank you very much. We were pondering on this idea. So what did we come and say about social cohesion this morning at this august occasion with lots of important people? And we read the summary and we got anxious about it. And we didn't know that there were so many learned people in this room this morning. So we thought, let's see what do we say about social cohesion this morning. Let's start off, so we were pondering, so what is social cohesion in the first place? And we just put together and Google is very good, Googled some of the stuff, and said it describes a cohesive society as which one works together for the well-being of all, to fight exclusion, marginalization, creates a sense of belonging, promotes trust, and offers the members the opportunity for upward mobility. Okay. So there was a mouthful for us as we sat as the office bearers and said, so how do we unpack this? What is this upward mobility we're speaking about? Are we in favor of that? But we left it as is. We said, let's not mess with the definition. But on all of our lips is the ANC National Conference at the end of the year in December. Now, besides the political race as to who will become the president, is it CR17, Nkosazana Zuma, Jeff Radebe, Lindiwe Sisulu, there are also policies that can be adopted at this particular conference. So we took an extract from the discussion document on social transformation, which was tabled as the fifth policy conference. And it said that in South African context, the concept of Ubuntu is central in nation building and the social cohesion project. So we speak a lot about Ubuntu very loosely, you know, and we have our definitions there about it, and how do we create the society that we envisage, as Chris said, through the Rainbow Nation. How do we develop that? And we've seen that it's been quite a tough project. At one stage, in the 80s, we as young activists at UWC would never regard ourselves as colored people. We were black people. And now in the 2000s, you give this resurgence of a colored identity. Does that build social cohesion? My answer is no. Should we move to a concept where we all regard ourselves as South Africans of the country, acknowledge our racial heritage and the prejudice we suffered in the past, but what do we build together? And how does the school play an important role in that particular project? So let's go and acknowledge what we have. What did I say? Oh, enter. Okay. So we come from a very divided society, and I think all of us acknowledge that. Not based on race only, but based on class, on gender. Patriarchy is deeply entrenched within our society we come from. We are homophobic, we are xenophobic, and all the other things. So the key question is, how far has the Rainbow Nation project progressed since the advent of democracy? And what is the role of education in the discourse of social cohesion? And what is the role that the union and its members will play in the realization of this particular cohesion? So those are the questions that we want to try and see if we can, in 15 minutes, address. It's a tough task. So look, 8-minute address, okay. I'll be quick. Now, first of all, we said, let's look at our reality and what factors have influence on social cohesion. We say that poverty is a key driver. And we identified two things we need to look at, and that is housing and food security. It's two key drivers. We also say that inequality is a major deterrent of social cohesion. And we zoomed in on the school, we couldn't zoom in on society, but we said in the school, post-provisioning is one of those inequality cost drivers. Infrastructure within our schools, professional development of teachers, okay? And then we spoke about the limited curriculum offering, Granville, that poor schools have a limited curriculum offering than rich schools. We're also saying that the curriculum itself, later we'll speak about that, could be part of the solution. We speak about discrimination, and we identify race, gender, class, sexual orientation, and xenophobia as one of them. Then we speak about violence, and violence in school, and here we speak about teacher on learner violence. We speak about learner on teacher violence, violence in the community, and where we are in this particular province, gang violence is a huge problem in our communities. I'm nearly done. I'm going to give some of my 4 minutes next door. But we're speaking about hope. So what is the hope in the social cohesion project? The school is central. The school can play a central role in addressing social cohesion. Why do we say the school? You know, where you don't find an ATM, you find a school. You don't have a police station, you find a school. You don't have a bank, you find a school. There's no clinic, you have a school there. So therefore, schools are a strategic place with educators everywhere in our society. Whether it's urban or rural, deep rural, you will find a school. And what is the role that the school can play? The curriculum needs to have an integrated approach. We need to integrate the building of social cohesion in the curriculum, and not isolated only to your life orientations and life skills. It needs to be an integrated approach. The issue of textbooks becomes important. Now, I want to go back to curriculum. As SATU, we've been calling for the compulsoriness of history as a subject. Can history be used as a tool for social cohesion? Textbooks is important. And I want to pause here to say that initial teacher training, and there we're putting the ball towards the higher education institutions. How do we build into our initial teacher training the issue of social cohesion, and how do we actually start to address from ECD to HEIs the issues of prejudices, discrimination, etc., so that when we come out of the schooling system, we've actually contributed to a citizen that is embracing, that is non-violent and non-discriminatory. Teacher professional development programs is a key point. And I think that Chris has mentioned that we have started a huge project on school gender-based violence within the country, and looking at how we partner with different schools and address the issue of discrimination, social cohesion, and violence. Infant stage, we'll have some feedback in a couple of years' time. Union programs must include this. Interesting thing, we started a program on LGBTI. And the prejudice in the room of the participants was shocking. So if the teachers are homophobic in the classroom, I mean in the SATU workshop, what are they like in the classroom? And those are things that we need to realize out there, and we need to address it. Community development is important. Let's not underestimate the issue of sport and after-school activity in the building of social cohesion. Art and culture plays an important role. And then I want to stop to say that we need to have the media in all forms to drive the agenda. We should not have a Dove advert where you put on a sweater and you put on Dove and you take off the sweater and then you turn white. You know? So the media needs to play an important role. And I think that's our contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Donovan. I'd like now to call on Lucretia Orense from the Institute of Justice and Reconciliation.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity. Just to tell you a little bit about the work that we've been doing with teachers in terms of social cohesion. The Institute for Justice and recognizes that teachers occupy key positions to promote inclusion and respect of diversity beyond the narrow notions of what history or other syllabi teach the next generation. Through pedagogy, curriculum, and policy reform, incorporating inclusive processes, and through fostering empathy and respect for all that can contribute to change and the change we need to see in our schools and ultimately society. A change that will see new and the next generations move beyond battling issues of black and white, victim and oppressor, and re-victimization. And instead of focus on getting Racism 101 as a first step to understanding the divide, to understanding the challenges, that we as South Africans face in dismantling and leveling the structural vectors that still divide us, the opportunities that present, and thus the future prospects of a socially and economically just quality of life for ourselves and our children. The legacy of South Africa's apartheid past has left many educators not knowing how to traverse the spaces of diversity, especially racially and cultural spaces. Understanding social and class difference is not inherent, and thus training is needed to help them gain a deeper understanding of this very complex dynamic. It is in our experience, working in all 9 provinces in South Africa on dealing with discrimination in schools, that we see the need for educators training in this regard. Race, class, language, gender, amongst others, are constructs, which in the South African context can be and is divisive, and also hinders social cohesion. So I'm just going to give you an overview of what we've been doing and just a little bit of background to why we do what we do. And we were approached by the Department of Basic Education in 2013 to ask, can we assist them with looking at UNESCO's Teaching Respect for All? And UNESCO piloted this project, and it was a curriculum framework and support material which aimed to cultivate respect for all people, regardless of culture, gender, nationality, ethnicity, and religious identity. And it was piloted in 5 countries across the world. Which is Ivory Coast in Indonesia, US and Guatemala, but not in South Africa. But the department wanted to know what is happening currently in our schools and how can we assist teachers to be agents of change. And so what we done, we had an initial workshop with the Department of Education, and at this workshop we were going to just look at what is in the curriculum, what is currently happening. But one of the officials that was at the workshop said to us, how can we expect teachers to teach when they are walking with the wounds of the past? And so they're walking with baggage, they themselves are prejudiced, they themselves discriminate. How can we expect them to go and teach something? What message are we sending to kids? And how can this be perpetuated in the classroom? And there's, the danger of that. And so what we decided as an organization was to visit the different provinces and to workshop this very idea with teachers, to ask them, what are you currently dealing with in terms of discrimination at the schools? And how are you dealing with it? Do you have methods that's effective to bring reconciliation in the classroom or on the playground? And what we wanted to do was, with those, is to help other teachers in South Africa also, to give them some idea of how they could deal with it. Lots of teachers have ways of dealing with it, and we thought we can use that in the South African context to give to other teachers that are struggling with those very ideas. And this morning, Dr. Whittle said, many people say, give us different forms of discipline. How can we deal with these things? And we thought teachers can help each other deal with it. And then just very quickly on the methodology, we gave teachers a space to talk. And I think teachers loved that idea. They wanted a space where they can just express their challenges, express how they are feeling, express, the difficulties that it is being a teacher in a classroom that is diverse, but also with children that are battling in their socioeconomic conditions. And teachers wanted a place to learn and share. And so we gave them that opportunity. But also, we took the experiences of teachers and we tried to put their stories into a little book that we've developed for them, where it gives the challenges, but also their methodologies that they are using. And then what we also done in our workshops was to just give teachers a starting point to how they can start dealing with their own prejudice. We believe that if we want socially cohesive classrooms and schools, then change starts with a person. And we cannot teach something that we haven't lived, that we haven't experienced, that we haven't grappled with, that we as ourselves, if we haven't interrogated our own prejudice, then we cannot get into a classroom and ask a teacher to teach on that. Because what are they going to teach? What is the body language going to say? So you might say one thing, but your expression might be something else. So we looked at all those things and we said we need to start with a person. And so we looked at the perceptions of others, how our viewpoints and mental models our mental models are formed, and how we can change that. Because we believe that, as we heard this morning, change starts in the mind, but it also starts in the heart. If we cannot empathize with people that are struggling in their communities because their socio-economic status is different or their challenges are different. Because we don't understand that, how can we empathize? So we encourage teachers to listen to learners, to spend time to get to know their stories by having conversations of diversity, having conversations of what is difference, and are we all human, and what is the starting point? So we asked teachers to have conversations with the learners, and we developed a resource called Classrooms of Hope, as well as a policy brief which is available, and that will outline everything that we said today and a little bit more. And then just for time's sake, I want to move on to the challenges and the barriers that teachers said they experience to social cohesion, what makes it difficult for them. And this is the highlight that I want to give, because it will also say, what are the needs of teachers? It's good for us to say we're going to put in a policy and we are going to put in systems, but what are the needs of the people that have got to work with this every day? So this morning, I just want to be a voice for those teachers. Some of the things that I thought directly affect teachers was they said they need multi-level training and support. Training on diversity and inclusion should be done at all levels. Officials, principals, teachers, SGB members, as well as SMTs and parents and community members need to be part of the process. You cannot just expect teachers to be the agents of change. Teachers need support. They need support from parents. They need support from their SMTs. They need support from the principals. They need support from the officials, the curriculum advisors. Everybody needs to understand what it means to be everybody needs to promote social cohesion and to get that understanding of what it is in order to take that forward. Educators need training in conflict management and discipline strategies. A big factor was the CAPS curriculum that is so jam-packed. They said they do not have time for anything else. If we're going to add one more thing to the list, it's going to frustrate them even more. So teachers been asking, can we have CAPS time management skills, and then language comprehension skills, basic psychology of learners, cultural intelligence and relationship building. We might take those things for granted, but there are many teachers who don't know how to build relationships and who are not culturally intelligent. How do we help them, and give them tools to be able to do that? And then this should be incorporated into the curriculum in all teacher training institutions. It should also be part of the continuous professional development of teachers and as well as the initial training of teachers. It should also be offered in different languages for absolute comprehension. They said that the training should be innovative and it should support. So training should be creative spaces where interactive learning can take place and experiential learning methods applied. The DBE should focus on soft skills training and how educators can contribute to a more cohesive environment. Training should be sites of introspection where educators have spaces to reflect on their own prejudices, which can negatively impact how and what they teach. Dialogue is an important pedagogical tool which can be utilized to share perspectives and stories, and through that gain respect for others' lived experiences. It should also be safe spaces to talk about sensitive topics like woundedness and trauma. We've heard that many teachers come with their own baggage. So educators come to school with their own baggage, where it's the trauma from apartheid past, an abusive partner, sick children or family. They are expected to show up and perform optimally, and it's not always possible. There should be counselors and support groups who offer care and support to educators and learners. These groups should involve the process of acknowledging, expressing, and reflection. And then lastly, they need skilled and motivated managers. Good and motivated leaders good leaders need to be motivated and have good interpersonal skills, discipline without corporal punishment, and demonstrate values of respect and non-discrimination. They should receive training in listening and relationship building, respect and non-discrimination. Good leadership does not guarantee success of building respectful schools, but the lack of buy-in will definitely lead to failure. Collaborative partnerships between teachers, learners and parents should be encouraged by leadership and management. Educators and SMTs should create a climate of collegiality, collaboration and shared professional norms and values and respect. Our policy brief has others, but it doesn't pertain directly to teacher development, so I haven't included that. So just to end off, respectful schools are democratically informed learning environments where learners and educators feel safe, supported, engaged and included and positively challenged. A respectful school is one in which all role players are equipped, enabled and supported in displaying a sense of human dignity towards the other. Educational professionals, along with learners, are key stakeholders in this process. Educators are able to model and nurture attitudes which demonstrate tolerance, equity, and the positive indifference. They are mothers, fathers, counselors, nurturers, judges, jury, and everything in between for learners and peers who turn to them for answers. These are so many hats to wear. Are we doing enough to equip them with the skills that they need, not only to teach, but to help nurture resilient, respectful, and intelligent future leaders, but who also know about social cohesion, diversity, and inclusion? These are not concepts familiar to most, and so we must assist them. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much. I've just been caught sort of slightly unawares, but I'll see what I can do. I just want to say at the outset, listening to these presentations, and also to the part that I heard when I came in, I must just say how delighted I am to see what is actually happening here today, because I don't think there is a single objective or target in our society that is more important to us than social cohesion, because the opposite of that is what we actually see periodically bubbling up in this country with very bad results and consequences. And I want to thank and congratulate IJR and all the participants again, and the other panel speakers, for all the effort that is going into today. It really is very encouraging to see that this is happening. I'm particularly glad that I came, because I wasn't quite sure to what extent the social cohesion concept, which is so important to us as a commission, would feature, but it is featuring so dominantly and positively in so many different ways right now, that I'm very glad I will be able to go back and share with the leadership of the commission and my fellow commissioners, to share the experience I've had today. And I am going to, unfortunately I can't stay all day, but I'm going to make sure we get the papers, and we're going to make sure, first of all, that we internalize that. And I'll tell you why we want to do that. Because it's important for us to meet the mandate which we have as a Chapter 9 institution, in terms of Chapter 9 of the Constitution, together with the Human Rights Commission and the Gender Commission, that we have been designated specifically to promote the question of social cohesion, within which respect is one of the most fundamental elements of social cohesion, and you referred to it a moment ago. So the challenge is very vast. There are different manifestations of things that are disrespectful to one another, all kinds of pronouncements. Suddenly, most unexpectedly, people come with pronouncements that are divisive and that are harming the fabric, a united fabric of this country. just by the way, I think it was Chris said something about friends. Now, I'm a former politician with the emphasis on former, and there's a saying in politics, friends come and go and enemies accumulate. I suspect that's very much a feature of the landscape right now. And speaking of which, the landscape, the political landscape, and the social landscape at the moment is not conducive to positive sentiments, to positive concepts like social cohesion. It's not conducive to that. It's too messy, it's too confused, and in fact, I actually find it quite depressing. And Chris referred to the fact that the Rainbow Nation concept is sort of severely under threat, if there is still a rainbow. I had the honor to serve under President Mandela for 2 years as Deputy Minister of Education. The education survived me. It was only 2 years, so that's the good news. But those first, the Nelson Mandela term of office, and this is not just nostalgia. Like somebody said, nostalgia ain't what it used to be. This is not just nostalgia. This is a reality. And one saw it manifest in so many different ways. But unfortunately, it has been eroding as we've gone along. And that was at the period when we were most cohesive. And it was also his example that made it possible for that sense of unity and unity of purpose to be there. I recently took my grandchildren to see The Wizard of Oz, but so I'm reminded of what Dorothy said to Toto when they landed there. She said, "We're not in Kansas anymore." Now, they're not in Kansas. Kansas was not a nice place to be, but where we are now is not a nice place to be. And we are going to have to deal with it. And Chris said, it's a societal problem. Yes, but at the heart of it, without disagreeing with him, what happens in the schools is going to make such a defining difference as to what actually happens in society. And as I was listening to the presentation this morning, I mean, it is hugely challenging things to do. I know the curriculum being overloaded, all kinds of things. So I don't think anyone should have any illusions about the challenge that is actually being formulated here today. Now, social cohesion is one of the, it has been elevated as one of the important tasks of our Commission for Culture, Religion and Language. And we, in fact, are going to, together with multilingualism, which we also believe is a promoting social cohesion measure, that will be our objective for next year. We are seriously underfunded, just by way of comparison. The Public Protector gets 200 million, not with a hell of a lot of success in stopping the corruption and so on, but her budget is 200 million, ours is 30 million. So that was in the pecking order of what is important in society to be dealt with. I think budgeting always actually gives an indicator of where one is located in terms of priority. But we do collaborative things. We work with stakeholders, NGOs like IJR, with which we have a very good and valued relationship, other organizations similar. And with the private sector generally, we find business is interested in hearing what we are about and what we are trying to do. So we soldier on with that. But just a last point. What we do have is access to important role players, especially in government. We do not report to the government. This is an important distinction. We are appointed by the President in terms of the Constitution, Chapter 9 of the Constitution, but we do not report to government. We report to a multi-party committee in Parliament. It's the Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs Portfolio Committee. We, in fact, spent 2 days reporting on the report we did recently on religion and the abuse and commercialization of religion. But it's an important distinction in that we cross political boundaries completely. So we report to a multi-party structure, And our access within government is there. So one of the first intentions I have, if anybody wants to take up the offer, is to try and make sure that we set up something with the Minister of Basic Education, if you haven't already set that up or haven't planned, I don't know what your plans are, but we will certainly make a big effort to make sure you have access to her, to brief her on what is being done and has been done already in this important field. If it's already been done, maybe you should do it again. But we can look at that as an option. And also the new Minister of National Education, Professor Shlingiwe Mkhize, hopefully she'll stay there for a while. But if she does, she is a good friend of mine, a very capable, very capable and committed and sincere lady. So I will try from my side to arrange that there can be meetings with them as well. And then we must jointly sit down at some point and identify other stakeholders in government, because it's all very well, NGO, private sector, all of that's great. But somewhere the tacky hits the tar, and we've just got to, and more often than not, that's in government. So one can't be in any way complacent about what's happening on that level. So from whatever way we can be free agents in that respect, and we would like to be. So I would just like to offer any help we can give in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rene. Just a housekeeping rule. There's 2 cars that need to move, a black Audi A6 A561408 and a black Honda CR-V CA905181. They're doing maintenance work outside, so the car needs to be moved. I grew up on the Cape Flats, so in the Galaxy, the DJ used to say, to get people to move their cars, your car's on fire, brother. So people fled the disco, but they really need you to move the car. Thanks. Now, before we move to the discussion, and thanks for those very brilliant overlapping presentations, range of issues we need to engage with. I just wanted to give an opportunity for Professor Mender from the National Teachers Union to make 1 or 2 observations on the issue of social cohesion and teachers. He felt there were some key issues he needed to raise. So, give you an opportunity.
Thank you very much. I don't know if I'm facing everybody from where I'm standing. Perhaps I can move a little bit. I think I'll stand. I won't take too much of your time, because when we received this invitation and I was asked to come and represent the union, I wasn't sure that I had to make a presentation. It wasn't actually made clear to me that I had to do that. But seeing that the other sister unions were making a presentation, I thought I should not be left out. Since this is a recruitment exercise, I just want to make perhaps 3 things. I see that some of my former colleagues from the universities are wondering what I'm doing with the unions, like Professor Mda, Professor Robinson. I have been asked by the National Teachers Union to set up an institute to deal with continued professional teacher development. I think that's the order. As far as I know, this is the only labor union that has actually come up with a structure. What we have now is only a structure called an institute to deal with that. And the issue is that they have noticed that teachers are having problems in different ways in terms of what they are supposed to be doing. Now, the observation that I want to make is coming from the baseline research that I had to conduct as a result of being placed in that position. I wanted to find out from the teachers themselves, and I think this builds up very well with the other colleague who presented, the lady at the end, because this is the voice of the teachers. I am formerly from the University Faculty of Education, served as dean for some time, and the issue of social cohesion is not prominent in the curriculum. as an issue. I know that aspects of it are covered in the curriculum as we train teachers, but it doesn't stand out like mathematics or physical science and things like that. Now, when I conducted this research, I only had one question. I was asking the teachers, what do you want the Institute for continuing professional teacher development to do for you? What kinds of things are uppermost in your minds? And I was surprised that the first 3 things that came out as priorities in terms of the incidents, the number of people citing them, if I were wearing the glasses of social cohesion, those are the issues that were really uppermost. Perhaps there are other things that I don't know, I was not thinking about it like that. But the first thing that came about was school organization, leadership. That was number 1. And then tied in with that was learner discipline. That was number 2. They wanted to be assisted on how to deal with learner discipline. And number 3 was they want to be assisted with inclusive education. Now, if you look at these top 3, it kind of surprised me because I was looking at the actual classroom transactions. That's what I thought I was going to see coming out of this research as priority. We want to know how to teach this or how to teach that. But instead, when I looked at these top 3, and actually the number 4 was also a problem because it was classroom discipline. And if you look at classroom management, if you look at the things that are troubling the teachers, it's not what I had in mind in my new position. And sitting here and listening to what is being said by those experts in the field of social justice and this whole issue of trying to look at how we can live together and so forth, I think that this research ties in well with what the teachers see as their fundamental challenges. The other issues came in later, like how to teach, the content, and so forth. But perhaps the final thing I'd like to say is before that I had done another investigation with the teachers in KwaZulu-Natal and Mpumalanga about asking them to reflect, thinking back in their own days and say, who was my best teacher? And what were the attributes of that person? And again, the soft issues, the issues like, this was a caring person, did not discriminate, looked at us, all of us, as gave us respect. Those are the things that came out. Then finally, somewhere down the line, this person knew his or her content. Because sometimes we put content above everything else. But actually the things that matter are the things that are kind of these soft skills that we don't teach directly. And the same question about the worst teacher. Who did they think was the worst? Again, people who discriminated between those that were bright, that were not bright. The science teacher who only spoke to males instead of, addressing females. Cruel, used a lot of physical what. And somewhere down there, the issue of content does not usually come up front. Instead, it's the issues that bring us together in terms of social cohesion that appear to be the problem areas. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Prof. Imende, for that. Before we open it up for discussion, I wanted to give Dylan Ray from Shikaya the opportunity just to give some responsive feedback and thoughts and observations in response to the presentations that have been heard and maybe the ones also preceding that. So, Dylan, if you want to come up and then we'll have a little time for opening up the discussion a bit more wider.
Yeah, if possible. Well, I'll grab a chair. I just need to play something. Thank you.
Oh, you want to play something?
Yeah, it's very brief.
It's on. Oh, it's on.
Good afternoon. No, morning. Well, I don't know what it is. Yeah, kind of. It's Cape Town. Who knows what the time is in Cape Town at any given time? So, my name is Dylan from Shikaya. And I was asked to exactly just give some responses to what's been raised, and then give some thoughts around the role of civil society in working with schools and specifically teachers in this area of social cohesion. And interestingly enough, a lot of what everyone here has spoken about touches on some of the two key things I wanted to raise. But I thought I'd start with just quickly just highlighting just a few things from each person's what each person said, which I think are so crucial. And the piece that stuck with me from what Lucretia said was this idea of where is Lucretia gone? Right in front of me. There we are. Exactly. Was this idea of centering the teacher as a person, as a human being, who has prejudices, who has wounds, who has biases, and yes, can teach content and all this stuff, which was now echoed by our colleague. And this idea that if these are people we're dealing with, we need to let people have conversations, and we need to let people be able to talk and to share this what's inside them. Because as I mean, even Granville spoke about this about the grade 6 teacher who fails grade 6 exams and then has to teach grade 6, you can guess what's going to happen to the grade 6 pupils or learners. The same thing happens with teachers who are not reflective, who have not engaged with some of these issues. It means they're unlikely to be able to be equipped and even feel that it's important to allow the young people in their classes to engage with these issues. And what was interesting about Chris, what you had spoken about, the idea that the sensitive subject matter is difficult for teachers, and I'll talk very briefly just about the support that can be offered there. But the one thing that Chris, that you had said was that there has been a big focus on race in our country, and race is an issue. And I'll play you something which will address that, but I wanted to put on the table that I think for a lot of schools in South Africa, of the 20% section of schools, largely quintile 5, I think there's not enough focus on race. And there's too much focus on, well, we have issues of diversity and problems to deal with, but it's sexuality and it's gender, because those are a little bit easier maybe to raise. But I don't think enough conversation has been happening about skin color and how the past has shaped that. And then I think in other schools, there isn't perhaps enough conversation about the other in the school, whoever that other is, whether it is from around geography or gender or age. I totally agree with, what's it? Jonathan. Okay, great. Was this idea of schools being strategic. And I loved what you said about that there's a school everywhere where there's nothing else. There's a school. And I think what's important about schools, and especially around social cohesion, is that you have a captive audience for 12 years. And we know that the work of social cohesion, of developing human beings, takes a long time. But you have them for 12 years, and then after that you don't have them. After that, it's very difficult to teach and to develop citizens in whatever behaviors you need in social cohesion. There are very few ways we can do that, but we've got them for 12 years. And so that school is important, which then puts a big emphasis on the teacher, which relates, sorry, so I didn't get your name. Renier. What Renier said around that social cohesion is, I think you said, the most important issue that we should be dealing with. And I wanted to put that as Granville painted this picture of this move from a focus on social cohesion issues to then real STEM subjects, and now it's starting to emerge to social cohesion again. That actually we've got to upfront social cohesion as the thing. Because if we don't get social cohesion right, and social cohesion, as Yusuf outlined, is not just about integration issues, but it's about inequality and justice. If we don't get that right, it means that it doesn't make a difference how literate our citizens are and how great they could be in jobs. Society is not going to function. And we're starting to see society not functioning. So the challenge for teachers and schools and education departments is how do you, of course, focus on STEM, but not see social cohesion stuff as this add-on or as something that we just integrate into it. It's the core from which these other things emerge. So I wanted to just put those things out there because they relate to the role that I see in my work, having been in civil society and working with teachers mostly in supporting broadly ideas of social cohesion. And there are two things I wanted to put forward in terms of this, the place of civil society and organizations such as IDR and Shikaya and others, and unions. Is one, this need for the teacher to be seen and supported and developed very deliberately as an agents of change, agents of social cohesion. If I could find, there's probably a better word to say that. That's not very sexy, but we'll just use it for now. And that civil society, very specifically, be the ones that can help to really support that development of the person. And I'll talk very briefly about maybe why it's hard for education departments to do it, and sometimes hard for the school to do it themselves. And the second thing, which is counter to someone who had said earlier on, this idea of that social cohesion needs to move beyond young people just mixing, across, say, color lines, if that's the integration part of social cohesion. I want to put that there are bridges to be built and that need to be built between young people because of the divides. Maybe it's just a Cape Town thing, although I do go in other parts of the country and I think it's similar things there. But also bridges need to be built between the adults in these schools, between the 20% and the 80%. So for the last year, we've been doing a lot of work around integration and transformation in schools, and in the process of writing a book, we've been interviewing people on camera. And initially, this book started as a book for all schools in South Africa, because quite frankly, all schools should be places where kids feel they belong, where kids feel they're safe, where their identity is able to shape. But given what's been happening in our country for a long time, for the last while, and then perhaps it's been happening for a long time but just hasn't hit social media, is this need for the ex-Model C in private schools to really take some, a deep, hard, uncomfortable look in the mirror. And to really look at this process of transformation and integration as they've seen, to question that and to look at how it can be done differently. So I want to just play you two very short clips. They're only 3 minutes each. One is from a teacher, and I have no idea which one comes first, so it will just be random. And then I want to just talk about why that's important. So just have a listen and a watch, if I can find the volume button.
So on the point of language, maybe it's just important to distinguish. When I say I identified as colored and I changed the way I spoke, I wasn't walking around saying I'm very angry and being aggressive with my R's and things like that. The important intersections that I come from, a middle to upper class home, was at the school since grade 1, which is a white school. So my language itself was geared towards that shift, if that makes sense. So the shift wasn't one day speaking like A and next day speaking like Z. It was a noticeable thing where I was like, oh, I used to pronounce this particular word that way. Let me not do that anymore. Do you know what I mean? So instead of saying very, I would say very. You know what I mean? So language shift was gradual, but also there was that flip in grade 9, which you were made fun of at that school. You were made fun of for speaking like a colored, because again, the racial demographic and the shift was the way it was. So for me, I was like, why would I want to be berated by these people? Obviously now I'm thinking, damn these people, let me speak how I want to speak. For example's sake, let's say for instance, you're the teacher in the class, and I say, sir, can I go to the bathroom? right? And then some white kid in the class would be like, don't you mean bathroom? And then everyone would be like, ha 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 ha. And then you'd say bathroom, perhaps. Or maybe you'd be red-faced and then leave. And it's those subtleties, right? Because the teacher's not going to say, don't say that to him. He's probably going to laugh along with you, right? Because what would a teacher say in that instance? Don't say that. Don't tell him to say bathroom like that. No ways. No ways. No ways is any teacher going to say that at a school like the one I went to. Because they also come from a culture. And they've now been ingrained into a culture in that school to accept that that's normal. You know what I mean? So it's not like someone's going to strap you to a tree or sellotape you and say, speak this way. It's so freakishly underlying that you can't even tell it's happening to you sometimes. If you're a kid, if you're a 14-year-old child, and a teacher is laughing along with him, you feel like you should also be laughing along. You want to be part of the joke, right? And you do. You give up of yourself. You're like, I guess I should be saying bathroom that way. And then, boom, just like that. Next thing you know, you're doing things you don't want to do. How wondrous would it be if, when my parents came to pick me up from a friend's house, they didn't have to change the way they spoke when speaking to my friend's parents? I think that would be wondrous. I think it would be wondrous if you weren't an outsider at a school and you could be accepted not by giving into power structures, but just because you exist and because you go to that school. I think that would be wondrous.
So what Nabil raises, I mean, it raises a whole lot of stuff, but what's interesting about it in terms of social cohesion, the role of the... Whoa, Leah, wait, we'll get to you. Yeah, these teachers, they just want to interrupt as you're talking. Excuse me, we'll come to her in 30 seconds. See, people want to talk, and teachers want to talk. But there's, in terms of a teacher, it's about, so how someone has to support the teacher to be able, in that he was talking about, a made-up teacher, clearly, but there's interactions he had, to be that kind of teacher who can, in the face of peer pressure, because we know that teachers feel that as much as young people do, in the face of that, to be able to stand up and see that this is a teaching moment where I have to intervene, where I have to go against the grain that says that, and that maybe I will, not be a part of the joke and not be a popular teacher, whatever it may be, but to be able to say, this takes some courage as a teacher to be able to stand up and say, that's not going to be allowed in the classroom. Because I can imagine, if that example was totally accurate, one of the things that we're going through the teacher's head is like, I don't want to embarrass Nabil by saying that's not what we do. But actually, what did Nabil need? Nabil needed a voice of a teacher. But if the school infrastructure is not allowing that voice to be there and is not praising that, then where is that teacher going to get some support from? And that's part of civil society that I think we'll get to. Here's one last little thing. It's a teacher, as you've already seen. And here we go.
There was one lesson I did in my second year there because I was just tired of hearing very kind of racist comments in my class. And I wrote up a whole lot of words on the board and I said, let's talk about stereotypes. And it was obviously that awkward beginning of how do we deal with, you can't write those, you can't write gay on the board. You can't write this on the board. And they started with kind of stereotypes of Jewish people and kind of went through it. And then we got to black people and they couldn't stop talking. Uncivilized. And I was sitting there back, and this is 2014, 2015. And the next one I said white people. And there were 2 scholarship kids in our class from the local kind of farming community. I mean, there was silence. And one of them said, spoiled. And the class erupted. I remember one girl in particular standing up and saying, well, at least my father worked for my iPhone. Your parents choose not to work, so you don't deserve one. And I mean, from a teaching perspective, I didn't know what to do, to be honest. I could see that it was creating rips in friendship, and I felt like it was out of control. And at the end of the class, grade 9 came to me, the person who had said this about the iPhone, and came right up to me. She was taller than me, and said to me, "You'll never talk about race or politics in your class again." I emailed all the parents, telling them that this has happened and encouraging them to continue the discussion at home. But I think from there, that grade, which would now be in matric, started talking more openly about these issues. And with the change in management, those kind of conversations became more prevalent, actually.
Again, with Leah, I've got 2 minutes, so I'll just quickly say this. With Leah, it's about, what support do teachers get? And she's clearly a teacher of social cohesion. You can see that, in the way she's talking. But what support does she get to continue to disrupt the conversations and the thinking? But also in her case does she have support to do it again? Because it didn't work so well for her. In reflection, she's thinking, well, they may be a bit older now, they're better. But at that moment, she was like, I don't know what to do. I'm stuck. And she emailed the parents. But where is that support coming from for her? Wow, here we go. Lucky I don't teach anymore. And so I think the civil society organizations are specifically placed because they can be slightly independent, and they can be brokers of relationships, but also, I'd say, formers of communities, and not communities of practice, because quite frankly, I think that's just a whole bunch. No one actually forms communities of practice. They say they do. I think what we need communities where relationships are formed, where friendships across divides are formed for teachers, so that a teacher like Leah, can talk to a black teacher and say, what happened when you were discussing these kinds of issues? And yes, I learned a strategy, community of practice-y thing, but I also learned something about that person, that human being, which I take back into my classroom. And it's hard for schools to do that unless you have incredibly dynamic and visionary leaders and leadership. And it's quite hard for education departments, because education departments, quite frankly, they do have some difficult things to get STEM subjects. And they're not necessarily experts in those spaces of how you build those relationships. But an IJR is an expert in that kind of space, and they do that. And then in my 30 seconds last piece, just to raise, is that other crucial role I think that NGOs play in social cohesion is in being these brokers of bringing learners together. While we know that it's not that just having moments and interactions is not enough for integration, but schools need to be bridging these divides. Schools can't always do this themselves. If a school approaches another school to have some kind of partner engagement, it's loaded with history, it's loaded with assumptions. Someone's rich, someone's poor, who's benefiting. You need an independent broker, an IJR, or whoever else, to be able to come along and say, we are creating an environment where your learners can get together in a neutral space, where your teachers can get together and learn from each other and grow and develop, where it isn't about school A is bringing something to school B, and we think that school B might be bringing something to school A. It's about we bringing you together to learn. And if we don't do that, 12 years is up, and where are these young people getting together and forming the relationships that we need if we're going to have this cohesive society? And that's where I'll stop.
Thank you for those excellent presentations. And I think the entire panel need another round of applause. So we've got a little time for some... The hands are shooting up already. We do have some time for some discussion before the next set of presentations. I think we should consolidate it with some observations and questions and so forth. So we'll give an opportunity for the members, the participants in the workshop to discuss. I unfortunately and very regrettably have to dash to get a flight now, so I'll hand over to Yusuf at this point, but it's been quite a privilege to be part of this fantastic set of discussions to date.
Thank you, Robbie, for chairing, and safe flight. Before I open up, yet another announcement. A white Honda Jazz CA774566. Or it will be on fire if you don't move it pretty soon. Okay. if it's any of your cars, they're doing roadworks. You need to get it out of the way. So just tell me again who was talking. 1, 2, 3 in a row. I'll take 3 in a row, and then I'll come to the right-hand side. So I'll start with Patricia, then behind you, Patricia, and then Radha. And we'll come back to you once I come to the side. Okay, so Patricia, can we please pass the mic around? And then I'll tell you how I think we might have to rearrange the agenda, if it's not obvious to you by now.
Hi, it's Patricia Watson, Department of Basic Education. I am very interested in the way in which social cohesion demands that we prepare to disrupt. And when we're willing to disrupt, it means we're willing to become uncomfortable and full of dis-ease. And when we start to talk about social cohesion in relation to the quintile system in schools, talking about quintile 5 for me is not talking about social cohesion. It's about trying to accommodate whiteness. And it's not about white people feeling more comfortable with diversity. The conversation's got to be about something else. So if we're going to look for questions that we ask ourselves, what are those questions? Because it's in your quintile 4, 3, 2, and 1 where issues of diversity still need a lot of space. They need historical time to also get explored and not being driven by the anxieties of whiteness.
Okay, the person behind you.
Hi, my name's Garth. I'm both a teacher and a PhD candidate, and my question or comment comes from both of those endeavors. Prof. Yusuf, I couldn't help, I don't want to call it a gap. I'm very aware that the presentation was a short snapshot of 450 pages, but I couldn't spot in the methodology where if you guys focused on the role of the school as management team, as policies, as structures within the school to address the social cohesion. And I feel it's coming through very strongly from the panel over here that I mean, even this last teacher, Leah, talking about the change came when there was a change in management. And for me, I mean, every school, Chris spoke about each school is individual and cannot be a one-size-fits-all. Lucretia spoke about it quite strongly as well, that different schools have different setups and different environments and different institutional habitus and different cultures. And I feel that teachers, the agency of teachers is massively facilitated when it's spoken to in that individual environment. Yeah, and I suppose my comment, my question is should we focus more on how a management team or an understanding of the perspectives of management or an understanding of the history of the school, whether there's a degree of assimilation or cultural diversity being celebrated, how that can affect equipping teachers for their task and facilitating the social cohesion. That's my comment question.
Hi, my name is Radha Magliasi. I'm a postdoc at SITE. So I'm very much interested in how you deal with, especially when it comes to the continuing professional development. I mean, how do you disrupt this discussion among the teachers? Because very often, just because teachers sit together and talk, does not mean necessarily that there will be collaboration, nor that there will be some critical insights. So they can just perpetuate their own beliefs that they already had. And how do you make sure that when you have especially some courses on like professional development programs or something like that, how do you make sure that they do tackle some issues? Because I will just reflect, for example, in this teaching Respect for All, when I was reading it, and I found it amazing that, for example, the picture that was portrayed of an ideal student is a student who's humble and obedient. Now, for me personally, I found that very problematic, whereas this was like as an outcome of positive outcome. The learner is now humble, learner is obedient. So how do you stir this discussion up? It doesn't mean that I'm right, but I'm just saying I personally find it, for example, problematic. Maybe someone else would. How to make sure that we discuss about that. Thank you.
I'll take 2 more comments on my right and then ask each panelist to briefly respond. So I saw 2 hands, one there. If you got a chance before, I might skip you on this round if you don't mind. Sorry about that. And if I got time, I'll come back to you. So I'm looking for people who... over to you. You didn't speak. So those who didn't speak, I'm going to give a chance. Maybe this is inclusion or not, or it's just, you know. Particularly if you've been silenced, then it's autocracy. Good.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Philadelphia, and civil organization kind of questions. And I'm not sure of the gentleman who spoke about being the Deputy Minister of Education during the... Sorry. Yes, I forgot the name. My apologies for that. But I think one question that I would like to ask is post-94 and there were teacher colleges that were closed down and etc. So I would like the reasoning for that, why they were closed down and the less importance of it, as well as why changing. I know maybe you can't explain this, why Naledi Pandor decided to go into an OBE system, but I'd like to know why the colleges were closed down and why teachers specifically had to go through a university criteria with other students. Just a question that just popped up. But my most question is on the methodology of the research that was done. Was the governing body of the schools taken into consideration? And secondly, the parental roles within the children that are in the schools were the parents themselves, because I try to understand that children don't come up or don't come to school with an ideology of certain behavior or character when they are faced with the example that Chris has made in the videos, that if no teacher will say, well, you can't do that. So when does the teacher play a parent role in the life skills or in life orientation, and when do you then include the parents in the social cohesion? Because for instance, if I am a kid and I never see black children or white children or Indian children in the household, therefore how can I be inclusive with other children if the parent role is not discussed in the type of research and what happens at school? And I think then thirdly, it's also, I'd like to just quickly on the inequalities of schools as well as learners, because in most schools, that I think the gentleman over there had attributed that schools are different. So in one area it might be racial, in other areas it might just be inequalities of students, what they have and what they don't have. So I'd just like to get whoever's reply on that, if they got my flow of thinking some way or another.
Can I take one more or two more questions? Any more questions? Okay, go for it, and then I'll go to Andrea.
Just one question for Letitia. I know you said done a lot of workshops hearing the teachers' voices, but have you done any research within the classroom because to assess the impact of the hidden curriculum, especially on social cohesion? And it's a comment on Chris regarding, I know the reality is that teachers are on the curriculum is packed and they can't finish curriculum, or know all the challenges there. I said earlier on a value-added curriculum, but I know semantics here, so it might rather be a value-embedded curriculum. And this essentially is not necessarily addition to that, is expanding your conscious thinking and actions, towards the teaching and learning regarding, with regards to social cohesion. So that's pretty. Thank you.
I'm going to go back to you, sir, at the back here from National African. You asked for a slot now or later. You agreed with the chair.
It's done.
You're done. Okay. Enver, and then we'll go to the panelists.
Thank you. So, a question to the unions. The role of SGBs, and I think Dr. Whittle alluded to where principal is a proxy in a non-functional or dysfunctional SGB. On the opposite end of the spectrum, where you have high-functioning SGBs and you have an old boys club involved, the principal almost becomes a gatekeeper of SGB appointments and so on. And I'd just like to know if there's any kind of engagement with, say, governing body associations around some of these issues and also issues of social cohesion. And it might be worthwhile in the future to invite someone like Fitsas to be present in a discussion like this.
We did. Thanks.
And that explains it.
To Does this mean I'm going to do something right now? Okay. The only question that really comes to my side was the one about the teachers' training colleges. Without dodging the bullet, I was no longer Deputy Minister of Education at that point. I was Deputy Minister of Health, grappling with AIDS and Mantu and a few other unrelated matters. So I didn't notice what was happening. I must confess, I left the battlefield of education, which was fairly contested at that point. I left. But, and without speaking ill of the dead, I think the second Minister of Health, after the Government of National Unity was formed, Professor Bengo, after Professor Bengo, Professor Kara Asmal became Minister, and I might be mistaken, but I think it was in that period, and I'm sure, it was interrogated very carefully, but I think that's where the decision was located, a collective decision. I'm not saying it was his fault, but I think I sensed over the years, because people, even now I'm still getting questions about things like that, but people remembered that as a backward step. It did not seem to achieve a purpose. And if there was a purpose, it's not clear what it was, and whatever it was, it didn't work out that way. So.
Thank you. I'd agree with that last statement. We in organised education could not understand that, and it sort of was jumped on us with no consultation. So I think we have to leave it at that. I'm going to speak more personally now. In my role before I joined NAPTOSA, I was a headmaster of 2 schools in Cape Town. Both of them were quite culturally diverse. One was a quintile 4, one was a quintile 5. So given that as a background, I'm going to answer some questions. In terms of school leadership and management, I think we have a fundamental issue at the moment, and that is that the education department sees principals as school managers. For them to tackle cohesion, they need to be school leaders, not managers. And I think that's a critical mind shift that has to occur. If that is the case, and if that could be, then we also can say that every school, because of the 12 or 13 years or 7 or 8 years in the primary school and 5 years in the high school, with in the high school a 20% turnover rate, you have captive learners for a long time. If the school management team and the principal work together on an ethos, and I must differentiate between an ethos and a school culture. Ethos is hopefully more formal and stays in place because of the way it is portrayed within the school community as a whole by governing body, parents, and the learners. The ethos can change the nature of the school, and it can be used to drive social cohesion. Underlying that, you're going to have a school culture, nicknames and things that kids do, etc. And if there's congruence of the culture and the ethos, then all is good. If the ethos and the culture or the formal policies of the school and the culture differ, then you've got problems. That's when you get haircut policies that suddenly blow up into a major issue, because what's happening at the top and what's happening under the surface are not running together. So it is absolutely critical. In terms of in-service training then, I think if we are just going to broadly train teachers and not address school management teams, we're not really going to get anywhere. If we want to target change fast, we need to address principals and we need to address school management teams. But we also need to address the education department and say, let schools develop their own cultures within a certain norm because of the differences between schools. Some schools are largely monoracial, monolingual. Other schools are very diverse. You've got issues of gender as well. So you have to allow schools to cope with that. So I think that was a very important question, that first question. The lack of change, I think, would be covered by my answer. If you want more change, I think follow what I've just said in the first case. The role of parents is a tricky one. Sometimes parents are all alongside the school, and those schools that are fortunate to be able to pick and choose will pick and choose from families that support the ethos or ideals of the school. Those schools are open their doors to all, get a whole variety of people who may have totally different views. However, over the period of years, you can instill in a school amongst the learners a culture that is different to what happens outside of the school. So if the school develops its own culture, it can then do things that were not possible within society as a whole. And if you regard the fact that the school needs to be an agent of change, then you need to accept that the school needs to develop its own culture and not be a total mirror of what chaos is going on outside. I think, though, that one of the biggest issues that we tend to miss at the moment, and Jonathan referred to it, and it's a big issue between us as unions in the Western Cape, is we sometimes have tired old concepts like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But if kids come to school and they feel unsafe and gangsters come into the school during the day, if there's violence in the school, if kids are hungry all day, you can't teach them anything, never mind social cohesion. So that is a fundamental that we've got to sort out. So when we're talking higher issues, we've got to look at that as well. The research in classrooms and the value added curriculum versus the embedded curriculum, I think that's a critical point. I'm a great critic of CAPS. My personal view is that as far as CAPS is concerned, and having taught recently in an all-boys school and particularly a primary school, is I think CAPS is an institutionalized form of child abuse, particularly against small boys. It doesn't allow time to develop things that would be necessary to promote social cohesion. The role of SGBs, that's a very tricky one, and it's as varied as the schools. Old boys clubs, yes, they do have a difference, but old boys clubs also do not always have the power that people think they have. You get revolutions in school governing bodies, you get coups, you get political intrigue, and they're not always all of one mind. So don't think that this is necessarily a unitary approach. What is important is that there is congruency between the school governing body and the school management team. So they need to work closely together. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm going to ask the panelists to be a bit brief. Sorry, it's stretch for time of that. So answer those that you think are most relevant.
Okay. Thank you. I want to stand a bit now. I've been sitting for a long time. I think that, it's a huge debate and a huge conversation, and it's not a quick fix thing. Changing human behavior is the most complex phenomena in this world. Now let's look at the school out there. The school is driven in a big way by performance on the standardized test. What does parents expect? You expect 100% pass rate in matric. You expect in grade 3s to the Litnum has to be high. You want the grade 6s to read at a competent level. You compete with the SECMEC test and all of those things. So testing is a huge focus in the school. So social cohesion may take a back step in terms of all the other pressures that schools experience. But we can't stop there. We have to say that how do we change the culture of the school, the culture of society, and a couple of things I think we need to address. I think Enver spoke some of them. For example, let's talk about the recruitment and appointment policies within the school governing body. You've got your school that is, let's say, completely integrated racially, using old apartheid terms. But you have your staff component being all black or all white. Are we a GEMAS group in that particular school? So what type of social cohesion are we teaching in that particular school? Is it from a point of view of patriarchy? Is it from a point of view of division? Is it a point of view of protecting certain privileges? Or what genuine social cohesion message do we send to everybody out there? Now that is where we need to, and if it's easy as that, Prof, to rewire educators. We all come with our prejudices from wherever we come from our homes, from our schooling background, from our tertiary institutions, etc. So how do we start to instill those values that we want our teachers to teach out there? Now remember that in the advent of the new democracy, there was a big focus on soft skills. And all of a sudden in schools, we started to change around and we want to be competitive with everybody on the TIMS and the PIMS and the SAGMIC and everything else. So what's your focus? Your focus is academic. If the child produces you the paper that gives him an A or her A, you have nothing to do with the social content and fabric of that particular individual, whether the person is racist, homophobic, anti-Semitic, and all of those things. So how do we have to integrate that into the total approach? Our curriculum is designed in such a way, and I'll finish now, Prof, in such a way that we start to compromise on extramural activities. We will cancel the sport at the school because we must have after-school classes for mathematics, where learners have a chance to integrate between learners on the same age cohorts playing soccer. We say, no, you must learn to read and write only. So I think that we need to see how do we approach education in a more holistic way. Things like the closure of the colleges did not perhaps contribute towards that, you know. How do we build into the initial training so that, and into the SACE code of professional standards, that before you become a teacher, you must be able to display certain attributes which you are going to have in the class. Because the teacher is a powerful person. I mean, a grade 1 teacher is more powerful than the mother of the house. My teacher said so. Whether your teacher was wrong or not, my teacher said so. You know? That's the only comment I want to give. Thank you very much.
So I just want to answer the question on dialogue in our sessions. So just to let you know, initially our dialogues was to ascertain what's currently happening in the schools in terms of discrimination, and not necessarily a dialogue about the discrimination itself. And I just want to make that distinction because our end result would never, want to prescribe to learners this is how you need to act. So it was to gain information from teachers in terms of what's happening. Our dialogues, we believe, always need to be facilitated by a professional facilitator. So if we're going to start dialogues with educators in the classroom, ensure that the facilitator is skilled in how to dialogue in order to get to the outcomes. And we also, that talking about discrimination and about those very sensitive topics might not happen in just one dialogue. It's a series and it's ongoing dialogue. So that's important to understand. And then the other thing I wanted to address, and sorry, then also in our dialogues, we would also want people to be acknowledged, respect, and respect for their lived experiences in those particular dialogues. So that's important. Parents to be included in the training. We absolutely believe that parents need to be part of the process. Teachers cannot do this on their own. They need the support of parents, community members, as I said in my presentation, as well as government officials and the curriculum and the principals. This is a holistic approach to social cohesion. And it's not just going to be part of the curriculum, but it has to be everybody in the community needs to be educated on that. And we know that each community is context specific. So whatever your context is, schools, whether teachers and management team work out ways in which they can get parents in to be educated on diversity and inclusion. That needs to happen at school level. But it is important that parents are included, because teachers have said, what if I teach a child something in my classroom and they go home and there's a different ideology at home? What do I do then? And then it's futile, my teaching in class. So, and then Have you been to the classrooms? No, we haven't. We have very limited resources. I'm the only person at the IJR that was doing workshops in the country, and the workshop initially was to find out what's happening, so that we could have a next plan of action. And the next plan of action was to develop a training manual. So we have a training manual now. The other challenge that we do have is funding. And NGOs, we're always looking for funding. So if there's funders in the room and you're willing to support and to fund us, I'm just taking an ad here quickly. This work is important, but funding and resources is a challenge. So, thank you.
I'll tell you what, I'll take one round of quick comments and questions because we're running a bit late on the agenda. So, one round of quick comments and questions. I'm going to start 4 people and no more. I'll start right at the very back and then I'll work my way to the forward. So, that gentleman at the back, the lady right at the back, and then Aubrey, then Barry. So, I don't like doing this. It's about dialogue, but keep it short, if possible.
My name is David Dukota. I'm a high school principal in Cape Town, and the reason I'm here is because I was part of this. My school was part of the study.
Yeah.
So just to support the speakers and their comments that the school should form a central part in this process in society, and I just wanted to say that my understanding is that the school should create a new society and not mirror what's outside of the walls. And so in areas like language, where in a school you'll have a formal language that doesn't involve swearing or being aggressive, in your response to violence, maybe outside of the school, you have to fight if you're attacked, but in the school you should be safe, and if you are experiencing aggression, there are other ways of dealing with it. With regards to attitude to work, dress code, and social practices, schools develop their own traditions as well. These are good things, and so just to say that I think that while in the video Nabil obviously had some issues around language, I think that came down to respect, and that he was not being respected in his school for the way he spoke. But I think that's a complex issue and another discussion. But schools really should be creating a new society which is negotiated with the people in the school. But it should be a society where we look at it and we go, that's how we'd like the children to live outside and when they're finished with school. Thank you.
Okay. Right at the very back.
Hi, my name is Juliana Woodendal. My question's kind of directed at Dylan, and just to ask, in the space that you imagine for NGOs and civil society as kind of independent brokers in facilitating these processes, what is the relationship then, we spoke about learners and teachers, but to these external community issues and the school, and this kind of challenge between the internal culture of the school and the external sort of challenges that communities, particularly in low-income sort of communities, face? If you can comment on that briefly.
Hello, I'm Audrey Weingart. I'm from the Western Cape Education Department, and we deal with assessments. I just want to say, in assessments, there's actually a lot of social cohesion, because you do a lot of respect and honesty and all of that. And I can just explain helpfulness. We go into the schools when they are actually busy with this, and the most one that I saw of social cohesion were 2 little boys sitting next to one another. The one was a bit clever, the other one was not so. So the one did the question paper, and they just shifted it over, and the other one held his other one, and he did. You see, it's this communicating and helpfulness and respect for what and more things. The other one that I wanted to just say about that, I was in teacher training colleges, and I think the question about why did it close should end. It did, it's done, we moved on. And I went through the whole process, but we're still living, we're just progressing. And I do think that the universities are doing a very good job in training teachers. Thank you.
Barry.
Hi, I'm Barry from CPUT Mowbray, where we prepare teachers, and I've often asked myself, for which schools are we preparing these teachers? I'm also surprised that surprised that there's a lack of social cohesion if, for me, it's a case of the chickens have come home to roost. That policy decisions of the 90s, and specifically the role of school fees, have made some schools an aggregation of privilege and for others an aggregation of frustration. And I'd like to hear what the panel thinks. To what extent is it the presence of school fees which maintains the, what are we talking about? Yeah, let's call it the inequalities, but I think it's actually the, let me just get the word. Yeah, I should Google it, yeah. The word escapes me now.
Okay.
But I think you get my drift.
Thanks. I'll ask the panelists to be brief because we want to get on with the next session, so don't feel like you have to comment. So,
User fees for public education is a sin. It creates divisions, it creates a barrier to access to schools, it creates inequality within our society, and it does not work towards social cohesion. The current policy, I've said it and Chris knows I said it before, that the current policy of quintiles is one of the key issues that are causing inequality within our school system. We've rejected all of us a long time ago. It is something that we are stuck with and needs to be changed in a big way. Because it creates two systems of education within our country. One that has state funding plus user fees, and one that is a non-fee school. And it is intensely problematic. But in terms of social cohesion, I think that we can work very hard to see how we as the educators and the community out there bring about that social change. We can always have hope around that. Thanks.
Appreciate Dylan, there was a direct question to you.
Sure.
So you just answer that one.
Hi, Rihanna. I think I understood the question, but I'll just shoot with an answer. If I got it wrong, then we can chat over lunch. But I think in terms of how schools engage with the external communities that they're situated in, is I think what you're asking, and the role that NGOs play in that space. I mean, first of all, I think that schools have very different communities. So while in some schools it's very important that you know, and Al Whitten speaks a lot about the community schools, and schools are at the center of a community, and that the school is a hub of learning and development for the community that surrounds it, and they're not separate to the community, and then there's ownership. Those things are really important, and also that the issues that are affecting outside the gates are brought into the school, so that they're not. And I'm not. I mean, obviously, crime would not be an issue you want to bring in, but in terms of if protests are happening around service delivery, that kids are allowed to engage with those issues, because you don't create critical thinking, engaged citizens without that. But then there are other schools who live in communities where you don't want them to just feel that my allegiance is just to that community. So my boys go to a school in Claremont, and that community is a very wealthy community. And I would think that my role as a parent and the schools is to say, your community is beyond just this area. And so how do we bring in what's happening in other communities into that particular environment for engagement to happen? And obviously NGOs, again, create that space, because there are NGOs working in these spaces. And a lot of NGOs will cross these different communities. Don't know if I got the question or answered it, but I got a kind of a shaky nod. So we'll have a conversation over lunch.
Over lunch. Any of the other panelists want quick comments?
Yeah, just a quick comment on the school fees issue. The school fees issue is partly also a red herring in the sense that we have got a substantial increase in private schooling in this country. And we have to look at the differences that occur between private schooling, and there we've got the traditional private schools and the relatively new public listed company schools, which are coming in at a certain level, and that also creates a whole different ethos and also exclusion. We also mustn't forget that in state schools, although there are these inequities, you will find that in some of our top schools in Cape Town, which are ex-Model C schools, you will have the greatest financial diversity between very wealthy families and the domestic worker who lives across the road's child. And that allows for a certain level of diversity to occur within that school. I'm not condoning that, I'm just noting that it is a fact. And also the fact that in quite a lot of those schools, there is quite a substantial subsidy going on between those who can afford to pay the fees and those who cannot afford to pay the fees. And that is a reality. But those schools probably comprise about 3% of the entire state school education system. Our biggest problem in the Western Cape, Jonathan, is that we have quintile 4 and some quintile 5 schools that are heading into the no-fee school category, just because of the way the quintile system works. Thank you.
Okay. Lucretia?
I just wanted to add to what Chris just said. It's not part of the Teaching Respect for All, but I worked on another project at a school, and just around the fees issue, a lot of kids are being discriminated against by teachers and other learners, obviously following on comments from teachers, because their parents, they either got scholarships to the schools or because they are the domestic worker's child, so they're being discriminated against by other learners at the school because of that. And even learners that are who has access to quintile 4 and 5 schools coming from the township areas. Lots of times there are other dynamics and difficulties and challenges when they have to travel to school, for instance, just as an example. We find that teachers are not empathetic. So children normally leave at 5:30 in the morning to get to school. They get to school maybe 8:05, 8:10. Teachers don't understand that they had to navigate traffic, taxis, the whole cultural thing maybe coming from the townships, the older people saying, you're just going to school, I'm going to earn a living, you wait and give me a chance. And so we find that teachers are not very empathetic when kids get to school, and those kids then have to stay for detention. And once detention is done, they've got to go home. They get home at 7 o'clock. They have to do schoolwork and get to bed maybe at 11 o'clock, start the whole cycle tomorrow, where you find that a child living in the affluent area that has access to the school, they don't have any of these issues and these challenges. So we just find that teachers aren't or the school system. So even if we're looking at, never mind the teacher, we're looking at the structural discrimination and racism at the school that don't accommodate for those particular instances, that is challenging. It is a barrier to social cohesion as well. And there are other instances as well. So it's definitely the fees and other issues around that, and access to those schools from townships.
Okay. All right. I don't know if the other panelists wants a quick word, but I'm very aware of time. And, the one thing about also being teachers, you need to keep to time, So what I'm going to do is suggest that we really thank the panelists at this point for a great session. Thank you. And we move to the next session, which will be shorter because unfortunately one of our speakers had to withdraw and was unable to make it. But the one thing that we need to know is a lot of our conversation is insular and sometimes myopic, which is why it's so important. And the next panel, we have insights from Rwanda and a discussant who has extensive experience of Africa, Professor Joel Samoff. So Professor Eugene Ndabaga and Professor Joel Samoff will talk, and Professor Joel Samoff will be the discussant. But I'd also like to hand over the chair to Professor Tobeka Mda, who's the Dean of the Faculty of Education at CPUT for this session. And so I'd like to welcome her, and I'm pleased that she'll chair this session. Thank you, Professor Mda.
He's not here.
Saroj is not here.
And so how long are we giving him?
If we can try to finish by 1:30 or 1:40 minutes, okay? So we give him 20 minutes.
20 minutes?
20 minutes.